Hi everyone, Nigel Saunders here. Welcome back to part 4 of working on my avatar grove. In the previous videos, I was working on pruning the trees up and cleaning up the landscape, and part 4 will be adding all the final little touches and details that really make the landscape look miniature. Since the last video, there's been some work done on the landscape, but not by me, it was by the squirrels. They've come in and they've dug out a lot of the moss. I had a branch that was behind this main tree that's broken in half now. And so any of the moss that was kind of peeled back, I put back into position, but you can see there's still some chunks missing. However, the work they did looks pretty good actually. The tree branch is kind of naturally falling down here, removing some of the moss. So, you know, with bonsai landscapes, you can do your best to get them all nice and show quality looking, and then the next day birds can be digging in them. So you're always patching them up and fixing them, and they're always changing. They're not a static thing. Just like your trees, the landscape could be totally different year to year. It's a cold, windy day, and I'm going to start by just cleaning up all the pine needles that have fallen down and any debris that's fallen down. Just do a general cleanup, and then we'll come back and have a good look at the landscape and decide what's next. Looking better. My goal for today is to get a nice studio quality photograph of the landscape. I'll show you the photo I took of my Schefflera bonsai from a previous video. That kind of gives you an idea for the quality of a photograph I'm looking for my avatar grove. I've got all the debris cleaned out of the landscape, and now I'm taking a look at it, deciding where to go now. So I'm liking the front here. That looks really cool. I think there's too much moss over on this side. It's just too lush looking. So I think some work needs to be done there. The other side is better, thanks to the squirrels, who actually planted a walnut on the crest of the hill. There was a walnut that was kind of sunk into the ground up there, so I had to dig that out. Yeah, so the left side's much better. There's not so much, you know, that constant moss. So I've got to reduce my moss down and introduce some ground covers. So I've already used sand in the pathway, and I think I'll use those crushed walnut shells to add another kind of ground texture. So I'll dig those out. Here's a look at my crushed walnut shells. Ross from the Toronto Bonsai Society brought me these when he came down for a visit. So thanks, Ross. These are really cool walnut shells. So they're different from sand in the fact that they're flat. They're not, sand has like a crystal-like sheen to it. And the walnut shells, they kind of look more like, I don't know, more like dirt in a pathway or something. So I'm going to apply that on, and we'll see how it looks. The first place I'll put the walnut shells is on the pathway, which has kind of disappeared thanks to the squirrels. And we had a lot of rain, which washed a lot of it down the hill. So I'll add some in here and see how it looks. I washed the crushed walnut shells because they have a toxin in them called juglone, and it can affect the trees in the surrounding area of a black walnut tree. Cedars are one of the few trees that can actually grow beside a walnut tree, so it probably wouldn't affect them, but I wash it anyway just to get rid of that juglone toxin. I'll start by sprinkling a bit in the pathway here, just to see how it looks. Not too much, just a little bit. Oh, it's looking okay. I just want to break up that sandy surface into, so there's more of a variation in ground texture. I'm just going to wet that and see how it looks. All right, I'll put some water on it now. It should tone it down a bit so it's not quite so bright. On the right-hand side of the forest here, I had this path that kind of zigzags back and forth up here. I think I'll also have a path that comes up through here, and that'll break up this big chunk of moss into smaller sections. My path will come up here. I think there's a rock here that's covered in moss, so I'll want to expose that a bit. This is a very thick shade type moss, so I can also prune it down in height. I'll sculpt all this moss, make it look nice and miniature. Again, I'm making the pathway so, well, there's quite a large rock in here. The pathway so it starts out larger and kind of tapers back in size to give that forced perspective. So I think I'll want my path to come around here and disappear between these two trees. So there's a look at the path from the front now. So I'll get out some sand and I'll try sand and walnuts kind of mixed together for this pathway and see how it looks. All right, I'll apply the sand now. Placing it in the pathway. And again, you just have to place it anywhere, and when you water it, it'll flow into all the natural nooks and crannies. So that's looking pretty good. Like that. Put a little more over here. Okay, let's give it a water now and see what happens. See it flowing down. Just clean off the front of the pot here. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. All right. Next, I'll add a bit of the crushed walnut shells. All right, we'll add a bit in there. I think that's looking quite good for that pathway. I think I need a clump of moss up here. I've got this giant clump, which might look good. It might kind of define that pathway a little more. So I will try. I'll remove the moss that's there and replace it with this giant clump of moss. Like that. Make sure that's well planted. Get the water on there. Yeah, that's pretty good there. And then I'll have to prune it away from the pathway a bit. All right, I'll come in here. Just do a little pruning. Like that. Maybe a little more if I can come in from behind here. That's the secret. Okay, that's looking good there. My next step for the forest is it's very thick on this edge, and I don't like, you know, landscapes coming right to the edge and then dropping off. It makes them look like they're crowded in the pot. So I want to taper that down a bit more. And I think most of this is just really thick moss. So I'll come in and start pruning away the moss. I'm going to prune some variation into this moss so it's, you know, more individual clumps instead of one big sheet of moss. I'm also pruning the moss away from the lip of the pot. I'll show you a view of that. So here's where the moss overhangs the lip of the pot, and that always looks bad on a bonsai. It makes, as I said, you know, the planting looks crowded in the pot, like it's bursting out of the pot. So from the top view, I'll come in with the scissors and prune that away. Let's see what it looks like from down here. Ah, it still looks good. There's a rock in there too. It's a very steep wall there. but it's holding together. I'm always stepping back, looking at the landscape, and as you get it more and more detailed, it becomes more and more miniature, and you start to notice things that are out of place. One thing I'm noticing is my new pathway over here looks too straight. I've got to get some variation in terrain there, so it's more like steps or, you know, maybe big plateaus along the path instead of being like a ramp going downhill. So I'll try that. Okay, let's get some sections in here, and I may need a rock in there. I think that would look good to have a rock somewhere on this pathway. I've got some surrounding the pathway, but none that are actually part of the pathway. So I'll look around for some small stones that I can put in there. I found one kind of interesting stone. It has a bit of nice texture on it. So I'll try placing that in here. And I'll sink it in quite a bit so it doesn't stand out too much. Yeah, that looks quite good. And maybe one more up here. I found a selection of nice stones. They've got some good rough edges on them. So I'll try those in the pathway. That's a good one. And there's another nice rough one that can go right up here. That looks good. And maybe another one down here. No, maybe in here, I think. Like that. And I think I need another smaller one up here somewhere. We'll put it right like that. So what I'm seeing here, I'm seeing this becoming more of the pathway and this becoming more of a mountain stream, or maybe an area that's washed away. So yeah, I think that might be a good approach to go forward, is that kind of concept where this is more a sheer vertical drop and this is the path that you would take. So I'll do a little bit more watering on the pathway just to settle those stones in. I'll get a bit of sand on top of the stones, and that'll kind of wash around them, settle them in so they look very natural. Stones always have to be planted properly. They have to be sunk into the ground to the right level. They have to have moss and that around them to look like they've been there forever. All right, let's give it a wash. All right, how does it look? Oh, that looks good. That looks like it has been there forever. I've got a bit of sunlight hitting the top of the forest. Looks really nice. Starting to look more miniature. A place you could go in and explore. It's very inviting, this landscape. I'm going to introduce another ground texture, and that's my cedar clippings that have dried up and gone a kind of a brown color, and I'll cut them up, nice fine little pieces, and try it on the forest floor. Here's some of my cedar clippings. These are clippings when I prune the trees, and I save the clippings just for this purpose. So I'll come over top of my tray here, and I'll just cut them into fine little pieces. And that should provide a natural kind of ground cover underneath the forest. It'll be the right color for cedar trees, that's for sure. And as they decompose, they'll help feed the trees. Kind of like a natural fertilizer. I've got all the pieces cut up. They're nice and fine. I guess you could use a blender for this if, you know, I don't think my wife would like me using her blender. In fact, I know she wouldn't like me using her blender, so I won't. I'll just cut it up with scissors. So that's pretty good. Let's try it out now. The squirrels took out a massive chunk of moss here, so that's where I'm going to try and put this cedar ground cover. So I'll come in with the spoon and just spoon it around there, that area. And hopefully it'll look like natural leaf debris that you would see on a forest floor. And I'll give that a water just to settle it in. It waters really nicely without floating away. I'm having a look at that area now. It's not too bad. I think a little bit of sand on top of that would kind of blend it in with the area beside it. But it looks quite nice. It looks very natural. So I'll cut up a bit more and I'll place it around the forest floor. As I'm pruning up the cedar clippings, I end up with some, some fairly good branches. And I can use these to place on the forest floor. Like there's one here. And this one will end up with a kind of a branch too. And I think that's important in a forest planting, is to have, branches and that on the forest floor, because every forest I've been into is just littered with all kinds of debris on the floor. And I think it really adds a realistic element to the a bonsai forest to have, a realistic debris. So something like that, it's a nice branch to place on the forest floor. I'll try placing some of the branches now. All right, I'll place some more leaf litter around the forest. Some down here. I'll have to be very careful to go back and look at it and see if there's any really large chunks that look out of scale when I do the final photograph. And then chop them up finer if I need to. I'm stepping back now, having a look at the composition, all the details, and maybe I overdid it with the leaf litter. It looks a bit, I don't know, the forest floor lost a bit of definition. So I think I need to kind of clean up some areas and maybe use that technique a little more sparingly. So I'll do that. I'll just brush some of it away, have a good look at it, and tidy it up a bit. Maybe this one also cascading down. It's kind of like a flowing effect. Looks better. I think I need a little bit of moss up here. So I've got a really nice clump here. That would look really good there, I think. Just have to wet it down a bit. So I'm just back here behind the planting, clearing some of this moss away from the base of the trees. There's a root in here that's sticking out of the ground. I'm going to prune that off. Like that. And I want to prune this moss away from the tree trunk here. It's very hard to get in here. I need really long-handled scissors is what I need. Yeah, it's nicer being able to see the base of the trees. This one's still kind of hidden here. Let's see if I can get that cleared out. I'll need two hands on this, and I'll have to come in here. There we go. I'm going to add some more sand to the top of this hill here. I've got a lot of bare spots after removing that moss that look okay, but I think the sand would look even better. Okay, I'll get some more water and I'll water that in. All right, here I go with the water. Get that sand all settled in. I'm getting closer to having the landscape finished. There's a lot of perlite in the upper section here that's exposed. I'll have to pick that out with the tweezers. And I'll just go through each section with the tweezers and, pull out any debris that doesn't look good. And I think it's getting quite close to taking the final photograph. as I'm working on each little section, it really feels like I'm in a forest. It really gives you that illusion. It's amazing. And that's what I call being in the bonsai zone, is when you look at the trees and the forest and it makes you feel like you're actually in a full-size forest, and it's just a magical feeling. I'm going to remove some of the moss that's underneath this tree. There's a few little mushrooms there too. Just because moss usually doesn't grow in the shade like this. You know, the moss represents bushes and ferns and that, and usually underneath the tree it wouldn't grow in a spot like this. So just gonna clean that up better. I'll need to get a toothbrush and just remove some of that algae off the trunk there. I'll put a little sand underneath the tree there. Give that a bit of water. Well, that looks better. Here's a view of the landscape now. It's all cleaned up, and I think I'm ready to take the photograph of it. So I'll get out my reflector board and switch the camera to photo mode, and then we'll have a look at what photos I came up with. I've taken my photographs of the forest. I don't have a stand that fits under this big pot, unfortunately. That's something I can get in the future. I'll look around for a stand, or I might have to make one myself. I don't know. There's a bit of sunlight hitting the top of the forest there, so the crown looks quite nice. I'm going to go in now, and it's on the turntable, so I'll rotate the planting around. You can see some of the details close up. Hopefully it'll take you into that miniature world. I'm going to go back now to part 1 of this series, and you can see what the forest looked like before I began the work on it and what it looks like now. Hi everyone, Nigel Saunders here. Today I'm going to be working on my avatar grove. I've got the cedar forest in the sun now. Oh, it looks really nice with the sunshine on it. Looks very miniature. That concludes the series on my cedar avatar grove, and now it's time for today's updates. The first update for today will be the work in the community gardens. We're working on the First Nations garden and planting trees. It is a beautiful Thursday afternoon here in the orchard, and if you look behind me, there's some new trees planted today. We started the day with a smudging ceremony. It's a historic day out at the First Nations garden. We're planting the first tree in the center of the circular healing garden. It's a pawpaw tree. It's quite an honor to be part of all this. So Lucas has the compass over there. We're laying out north, south, east, west to plant the second tree. And we'll be planting 3 trees today.
That's a thanking song in our language, Haudenosaunee Longhouse people. Yo are the feminine forces of Mother Earth. Ho is the male forces of Father Sky. Gaia is the world. All around the world, we want peace and within. Dane taught me how to hug it and what to go. So we brought our minds together. And so it is. Dane.
I made a meal out of the potatoes and the green tomatoes that we grew in our garden plot. So I made a nice curried dish. So I'll have a bit of that. So we're just laying out the other trees outside the medicine wheel circle. And then there'll be a path around the medicine wheel circle. And then the trees. And they're on this side so they don't shade out the garden. That should be quite nice. Work is continuing. We've got the north tree planted, and this over here, Laura's working on the west tree. We planted 3 trees today, and they're pawpaw trees, which is a native tree to Ontario here, and they get this big kind of tropical fruit on them. So here they are. They like lots of water, so we're going to have to water them lots. They have big leaves. Not very suitable for bonsai, I don't think, but you know, maybe someday I'll try it. So today I'm going to tie them to the stakes and put the wraps around the trunks so the rabbits don't get them tonight. So here I go. All right, let's get you wrapped up here. These are really good quality spirals. They're way thicker than most rabbits that have a hard job chewing through here. There we go, and I'll just cover the base up a bit. And that tree is done. So I just got to tie it to the stake up fairly high. Make my figure 8 here. And then around the stake. Looking good. I think that'll be high enough. You never know if the snow, you know, if we have a really deep snow in winter, the snow could come up to here and then the rabbits could get the upper part of the trunk. So we'll have to keep our eye on the level of snow, and if we have to, we can wrap a plastic bag or something around the upper part if it looks like the snow level's getting really high. So we'll just keep on our eye on the trees over the winter. Here's the scientific name, Pawpaw Asimina trioba. Yeah, product of Canada. Yeah, really cool native tree. I'm not sure what we paid for these trees, but the initial price tag here is quite expensive. If you look down here, $159.99. So that's why I'm protecting the trunks, watering them well, and taking good care of these trees, because it's a significant amount of money, and you don't want to lose it to rabbits or disease or from not watering it at first. Eventually it'll get established and we won't have to water them, but for now we got to baby these trees and get them through their first few years. If we look way out here in the orchard, you can see there's a pile of wood chips just waiting to be spread, and that'll get spread in the spiral connecting all the trees up, and then we'll be planting raspberries and blackberries and pollinators and all kinds of edible bushes between the trees, sort of as a undercover planting or companion planting. So they'll be kind of protected by the shade of the trees eventually. This looks fantastic, this orchard. It's hard to believe it was an empty field just, this spring, and now it's full of trees. There's some trees that didn't look so good. They didn't have a very good root system on them. And there's a few trees that got chewed on by rabbits before we got the wraps on, but hopefully. So you can see the spiral here. You can see it starts over here and spirals around. So this will all be a garden. So you'll walk in the grass pathways here, which will be mowed by the city. So it'll be a big spiral pathway that goes around, and you can walk around and someday pick fruit and berries on your journey. So here's the big pile of wood chips, and it's a pretty good pile too. So we'll be wheelbarrowing those and continuing this big spiral garden out to the outer extents. And then next year we'll be getting more trees to expand it even further. So lots of work coming up. But from an empty field, this place is looking pretty amazing. We've got 2 more pawpaws that we'll be planting over there in the edible forest. It'll be like a nature trails with all edible trees over on the far end of the property. So that'll be awesome too. Finally get that underway. Yeah, so a cool project. It'll be something I can do, work out here in the orchard till I'm a very old man. That'll be great. The community gardens is also expanding, so there's 50 plots in here, and then if you see the glimmering strip of, I think that's landscape fabric or something over there, that is going to be a new garden plot, and there's another one before it. So the first one is an expansion of this garden, so there'll be more plots for people to garden in, and then the far one is going to be used for training. You sign up for courses and they teach you how to garden, and all the crop and produce from this garden will be shared by the people who work on it, who have signed up for the course. So you can see this garden is pretty well ready for planting next spring. And this is going to be rows. So instead of individual plots, people are going to be, I think they get a section and they plant in there. Yeah. And here's the new garden. And then the edible forest will be on the far side of that, and that'll extend all the way out kind of around here. In the garden over here, a lot of the crops that got hit by the frost, peppers and tomatoes and that, have now been replaced by, colder, hardier plants. I think there's kale there, lettuce, Swiss chard, it looks like. Yeah, so sort of more of a winter crop or winter garden. There was talk about trying to get some poly houses built over these gardens to kind of extend the season, so that would certainly help. The peach trees here are getting some fall colors on them. That's pretty awesome. It's time to get back on the bike and head home. We're getting a new load of wood chips for the yard, courtesy of Tim's Tree Care. That's awesome. And there they go. Jonathan was over the other day. Jonathan and I worked on his birch forest last year, and he brought a whole bunch of trees over with him. He ordered a bulk order of trees, and he had too many, so he thought I could use some in the community orchard or the edible forest, and maybe some for bonsai. So these are black spruce, and there's quite a lot of them, and they're all slightly different, the trunks and that. Some have more twisty trunks, and so yeah, perfect size for making a forest planting. And some of them will go in the edible forest because you can eat the spruce tips in spring. Jonathan also brought a group of larch trees, so some of those can go in the First Nations garden. And there's more black spruce here too. The first tray is the larches I bought in spring, and then beyond that is more trees that Jonathan brought. So I have lots of small larches and spruces. My red maple here has some nice autumn colors, some beautiful yellows. Looks amazing. They just glow in the sunshine. Just beautiful. A nice way to finish summer. My amur maples are turning a nice red color. What beautiful fall colors. It's turning into a really nice fall day today. It's cool out. We were just a couple of degrees above freezing last night, but it's warming up quite nicely today. I've been busy working on the winter quarters for my tropical trees, so I'll show you the update for that. We had another rainy night last night. It rained really hard. So today I'm back in the plant room, and let me get in here. You can see at the top of this beam or wall here, there's a lot of damage up there. Water damage. So I'm going to cut the tops of those off and replace them. There's good wood down here, so I'll just replace the tops. This header board on top of the windows here is in the correct position. I verified that today. I made sure it was level and it's in the right spot, so I'm going to build around that. While the weather was good, I got out my tar with the fiber reinforcements in it, and I sealed all the way around the wooden part and the foundation, so any water running down here can't get underneath the boards that sit on the foundation and cause them to rot out. That's what happened last time. There was like silicone sealer here, but it wasn't applied very well. Water got in there and it rotted it all out. So to prevent that in future, I got some flashing made up, and I got flashing made up for the tops of the windows, and any water running down the wall will then drip off onto the ground, and I'll show you what they look like. So this piece of flashing goes above the windows. It goes right up there, and the idea is that it sits flush with the wall, and then the overhang goes around the wooden window, and the rain drips off down onto the ground. So that'll really help with water up top, keeping everything nice and dry. So I got the flashing that goes all the way around the foundation too. That was some big long pieces, and I'll install that before putting any finishing work on the walls. There's a view of the flashing. You can see it's quite a long piece. Yeah, so none of this was installed when the room was originally built, and I think that would have really helped stop water getting into the walls and rotting it all out. So yeah, it'll be nice to have all that done properly. There's a slight delay because it is raining, but I got all the rotted parts of the upright beam there cut away on both sides. So I was working on rebuilding the beam, getting them all cut out, tarred up and everything, and then it started raining. So I'll have to wait a while because my saw's outside and I don't want to be sawing out there in the rain. the rain stopped and the sun came out. So I finished off this one section. It's not in place yet. I've just loosely put it up there. There's a shot of the piece I made. It's all screwed together. It's one piece. So now I'll put the wood preservative on it. On the other side over here, I have to do the same thing. There's a lot of 2x4s that'll have to run up to the top there. And then there'll be the 3 2x4 plates that run along the top that hold the rafters or the roof joists. So yeah, I'll try and get some of this done tonight, but that rain really delayed my day, so it may have to wait till tomorrow. It's the next morning, and I've been working on getting all my new pieces in, which you can see they just fit really nicely up there. I was quite amazed. So that's all screwed in place. The beam or header above the windows is leveled. And I'll show you around the other side here. So this side is all done. So now I just have to tar it all up. And I've got to double it up on the inside here. So these pieces will be doubled. And then I can tar it up, put my flashing on. And I got to think of a covering for this whole room. I had this siding on before. And unfortunately, I tried to get it all off in one piece, but it just wouldn't come off. It just split. And I ended up destroying 90% of the siding that was on this face over here. And it had that styrofoam on it, which I didn't really like because the insects seemed to get in the styrofoam and carve all these little tunnels in it, and wasn't really happy with that. So I'm thinking of maybe, the board and batten finish on the room, so the vertical boards. I think that would be a better kind of covering for the room. So I'm still thinking about it, but I'm leaning towards that direction. I finished the work on the plant room yesterday by coating everything with a layer of thin down roofing tar. So that should be well sealed against moisture. That's all for today. I'm Nigel Saunders. Thanks for joining me in the Bonsai Zone. I was just looking at the price tag on these trees. They're pretty expensive. If we look here, no, that's not the price tag. Here. No, that's not the price tag either. Here. Let's try that again. It's the next day now, and work went really well. Work went really well.